Snyder Cut, the Justice League sort of new version that was just released, and there's a lot of things that are quite interesting about this. Not necessarily about the film itself per se, but I guess what it represents in terms of the fact that it represents a second version of the same film, one that was already released 3 years ago. It's not quite the same, but it's sort of a similar situation as what happened with Superman 2 back in the day, where there was an original director who filmed almost 80% of it, then got summarily, the Superman 2 director, Richard Donner, got summarily dismissed. I think in this case with Zack Snyder, the Justice League director, he had to actually leave for personal reasons, which were quite tragic. But the net effect, of course, is that there was this whole other film that was sitting in cans somewhere that never saw the light of day because the incoming director completely changed it. And subsequently, you get two different versions. So in the Superman 2 case, many years later, I believe it was in 06 or 07, Donner went back and did his own cut of it, even though it wasn't a complete film because there were sequences that he hadn't shot. But in this particular case with Justice League, the whole film exists. I believe there was like 2 or 3 days of tangential reshooting or something, but for the most part it was all existing footage that just got recut and tweaked and polished and made into a 4-hour opus for streaming. And I just find it's interesting, and I think in today's world of streaming, it opens up a possibility of variations, because unlike with cinemas, which probably only had the capacity to show the one version one time, streaming is just an endless database of stuff that you can watch, and you could potentially have multiple versions of things now.
Oh, you're spot on. I just want to take a backward step here quickly, Ben, because you and I know, what Hollywood's like, and there are all sorts of stories, about films, pressure from the studio changing films. So let's just go back to the 2017 version, and, half of it stays in the can. It only comes out, it's only 120 minutes long, et cetera, et cetera. There's no explanation of why that happened, but it's, when you get a replacement director in, they can be hired with explicit instructions from the studio saying, we don't want to show half that stuff, we only want it to be this length, and we only want you to show this story arc, and that's it. So, I believe one of the instructions was to make it more humorous, from what I understand. Exactly. So I haven't seen the original, but you imagine, anyone can imagine themselves in there where the film's sort of, predominantly being shot. There's a whole lot of material to choose from, and you get employed on the basis that you're going to do what some cigar smoking or chomping producer tells you to, and make it funny, because that's what I like. So, and you're right. So a cinema can't really, or people can't afford to watch one version one day and then come back and spend another $18 the next to watch the same film but slightly different. And this is where I think that this is actually a landmark achievement by releasing the 4-hour film in this way. This is Hollywood once again being more clever than the rest of us. Over the COVID era, we've seen the whole problem with cinema releases and what is a film, and do they need to go to the silver screen first, or should we just boot them out down the pipes? And this is the perfect solution. So they're making out it's a redux. They're making out that this is the real deal that you should have seen, 4 years ago. They're making you cry because this is beautiful, and a DOP who had half of his magnificent work lost finally gets to share it with us. It's a wonderful story, but it's all Hollywood hype. And the thing is that what they're doing is they're changing the way we think about film. This is a very long film. It's got 7 chapters in it. Now, that doesn't mean that the film ends or stops at the end of those chapters. But, gee, if you're watching it at home, that's a handy place to press pause
Indeed. And I guess the funny story about this is the fact that apparently there was some sort of contractual issue by because they had investigated doing like literally splitting it into episodes, just like a limited streaming series, but apparently they couldn't do it because it was going to screw up all the contracts with the talent attached to the film, which is hilarious. And the director just in the end said, "Look, I don't want to make this difficult. I don't want the lawyers in here. Just let me make my 4-hour opus and just chuck it out there."
And yet the hilarious flip side to this is that if he'd tried to put 4 hours into a cinema, he would have been told you can't go past 128 minutes.
And
so,
and that's the funny thing, because I mean, I ended up watching it in about 2 sittings over the course of the past 2 days. And
where'd you press pause, Ben?
At the chapter points, funny enough. It's actually quite good because it just cuts to black and then it goes to part 2 or part 3 or whatever. So it was very handy to be able to do that. The interesting thing is that when I watched the original one, I didn't think it was all right, but for me, I thought, given what it was supposed to be about, it underserved the concept, which makes sense because given all the backdoor drama about the production and everything, you could tell that the whole thing had been gutted. Like if you just watched it as a piece of fun entertainment or whatever, then I don't think it does fine. But as that big tentpole Hollywood event, it definitely fell short. This new cut is definitely way too long, but I will say that it's a vast improvement because that sort of epic Hollywood event sort of vibe to it is back. So you can tell, and because it's sort of not just a film on its own, it's in a series of films, that it matches up with the previous films that were created in the series, like tonally, story-wise, it all kind of made a lot more sense. And the only thing I would say is that obviously because they said, oh, well, it's going to streaming, so have at it, you can make it as long as you like. Obviously that led to an indulgence.
Look, I think, and I haven't seen the film, I'm probably not going to, I'm probably not that interested, but I'm always happy to hear that a film's vision has been realised, especially if I don't have to sit through 4 hours of it. And I think the good thing here, though, is the story that I'm hearing is it's repaired the franchise or the damage done by, I guess, a film that didn't probably resonate with its audience and probably didn't resonate true to its theme. I mean, Justice League is a great theme, to have all your superheroes there, working together. That's what everyone wants. It's no different to people wanting to see Alien versus Predator. And when it's not done right, people get upset. So if this version is fixing that, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. The other aspect I wanted to touch on too was just this concept of the fan base basically making this happen, because it started as a social media kind of following, and it largely, because at the time it was all very hush-hush. So the director leaves and then another one comes in, and then like this kind of myth built that there must be, like, if one director came in, the other director must have had a whole bunch of stuff on the floor that must have, why can't he just go back and reassemble it all? And it kind of started in like that, and then as the socials do, they let it explode into a movement where it became a hashtag, which was the hashtag Snyder Cut.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think what's really exciting, I guess, now about film is, you look at some of the reduxes that we saw back in the 80s and 90s, and they took 10 or 15 years to come out. And this is really the same thing. This is a director being able to come back, revisit their film, and create what they originally intended to create. So it's a great story in itself. But what's different these days now is with socials, the fans can get on board and the fans can make this happen. And that's what I mean. This might not be a film for me, but if the fan base make this happen, if the fan base can draw this, then that's got to be a fact.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The funny thing is that, like again, I was just imagining like if I had to watch this for 4 hours in a cinema, and it reminded me again that like although I guess I was watching it on a smaller screen, being at home, I didn't feel like I missed anything by not having been in the actual cinema itself. And I think that we've talked about this before. I think it's just a thing about the technology that is available to be purchased in your home to create a streaming experience or a cinematic experience where you don't need to go to the cinema for it. Like and on top of that, because it was in a non-standard sort of format length. It was perfectly fine for it to be 4 hours.
That's right.
When you're watching it at home like that.
And in a cinema, we all know that they don't go to these longer formats unless it's a blockbuster because they can't afford to have less sessions. So, the outcome is good in this regard. But, gee, what a way to have to endure it, hey? Over 2 days. Still, that's the new breed for film.
Oh, and I just had to love the, I don't know if you want to call it pretentiousness of it or not, but it was presented in a 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio, and apparently that best represents a comic book panel. So
well, there you go. Not since I saw whatever it was, that Lighthouse movie, I think a year ago, have I been so tortured?
I didn't like seeing black bars or the black sides on the screen, but okay, fair enough. If me being the old cinephile, I'll say that the only filmmaker that could get away with that aspect ratio is Stanley Kubrick. I think he was the only one that actually could compose for that image well. Having said that, it was well shot and everything, but I just thought it was quite funny because it's like they literally gave him the license to do it exactly the way he wanted, which, going back to your further point about Hollywood messing around with their product, that's a rare thing to have happen.
If you know the fans are behind it and you're streaming it, then I think Hollywood now is going to loosen up a bit. So we may well see some other interesting releases. Maybe Peter Jackson will come back and stitch all 3 Lord of the Rings into one, 10-hour opus.
That would be a very interesting sitting, and there will be people out there that will devote 10 hours watching it from start to finish that way.
You bet.
Absolutely. All right, we might wrap it up there, and we'll see how that goes. It's an interesting time for entertainment, etc. And I'm kind of curious. I think we're still only at the beginning of streaming, I think, and also the potential for what they could actually produce for it.
Very true. And I guess we'll see more of this now over the coming years.